Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. I'm Lisa LaFontaine, and I am the president and CEO of the Humane Rescue Alliance. And I'm thrilled to be joined tonight by one of the district's foremost animal champions, Ward 3 Councilmember Mary Cheh, and with HRA's Vice President of Field Services, Chris Schindler. And we have over 100 people on the call so far, so we hope to have a really great conversation. The way that it's going to work is that I'm going to do some moderated questions to Councilmember Cheh and to Chris, and we're going to do a deep dive into the Animal Care and Control Omnibus Act, which is in front of the DC City Council right now. But we're also going to talk about the state of the animals generally in the district. And at the end, we hope we have time for some of your questions. So without further ado, Mary Cheh has had a leadership role in just about every piece of animal welfare legislation introduced and passed during her time on the council. She's introduced legislation to protect wildlife, farm animals, companion animals, and most recently, we worked together to successfully pass legislation to end the district's participation in the ivory and rhino horn trade, which actually has been a problem here in the district. And we're thrilled that we can do our part in the city to stop pushing these iconic animals like elephants and rhinos to the brink of extinction because of poaching. So we're thankful for your leadership on that legislation, as with all pieces that we work with you on. And so today we really want to focus on something that I think is a historic piece of legislation, the Animal Care and Control Omnibus Act. But before we do, Mary, I would love to just ask you, what inspires you to be such a strong animal advocate?
Well, I guess the fact that I was brought up in a rural area in New Jersey. Some people think that New Jersey doesn't have rural areas, but they do. And probably my best friends were animals. I had dogs and cats and all sorts of things, and would run in the woods, and there were pheasant and deer and all sorts of animals. So to me, it's just quite a natural thing to worry about my friends. And on top of that, I really think that even though we often think of ourselves at the top of a chain and everybody is below us, really the animal kingdom in all of its aspects is so extraordinary that we really ought to think differently about animals. And while we can control and even ruin their lives, we are fiduciaries, I think, for them. And so I've just always believed that. And just the other day I had my grandchild over here, and she was helping. She's only 2. She was helping me rake the leaves, and she dropped this little guy in the leaves. And I did a FaceTime with her last night, and I said, we have extras, by the way. She's so attached to this thing, but she hugs my cats. She's, your experience with animals, I think, from an early age really has a big influence on you. So that's probably what that's about. And by the way, I often say, if dogs and cats could vote, I'd really be in a very good position. So.
There is no doubt about that. And turtles too.
Everything, yeah.
I think that people sometimes don't appreciate the diversity of animals in the district with all the beautiful green space we have. I mean, that's something that we certainly have a front row seat at the Humane Rescue Alliance. We care for farm animals, iguanas, lizards, snakes, turtles, companion animals, wildlife, and the city is full with so many beautiful creatures, and it's a real privilege, I think, for us to be in their midst. And given that, I think we have a very unique vantage point because we do the animal control work as well as the humane law enforcement work to see where there are gaps in existing legislation. And we approached you this year about trying to close a few of those gaps. And you introduced the Omnibus Act that's in front of the council now. And it has some really key provisions, including making sexual contact with animals illegal, which a lot of people don't like to talk about, but it's a real issue. But it also prohibits possession of any devices used to train animals to fight. And it requires that dogs and cats who are sold in retail stores come from rescues. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that bill, what some of your favorite parts of it are, and what moved you to introduce it.
Well, I think you captured it, which is to say we have some very good legislation on the books, but, you know, with legislation and things that are dynamic, there are always more things to do. And so there were these gaps. One of the provisions in the bill is to allow animal control vehicles to be outfitted with lights and sirens. You know, sometimes, maybe not now during the pandemic, but in the ordinary course, especially let's say during a rush hour, getting animal control out to a situation where there may be a rabid dog running around, or, you know, a dangerous dog, or some other issue like that, getting them to that space in good time is really important, because sometimes, you know, officers may not know what to do, and it might wind up that the animal is shot or someone is hurt. So it's important to get the animal control vehicles out there as soon as possible. This would not be many vehicles, but some vehicles to be able to be deployed that way. I think that's pretty important. You mentioned another one, these specific tools and devices that people use for animal fighting. A lot of times, you know, and Chris can talk about this too, you'll get complaints about that, you know, that a property is being used for animal fighting. The authorities will go there, they'll see these devices and that sort of thing, but the animals are gone, because these people are pretty wily, and they, you know, they'll move the animals. But now these devices, which are almost and maybe entirely used for these purposes, so they may be unique to this activity, having possession of them itself could be, you know, a crime. There's another aspect of this too. I don't think this is one that you mentioned, but I'm really keen to get this done. It talks about in divorce proceedings or separation proceedings between couples, the way the law treats animals now in disposition, you know, of property and whatever, as property. It's like they're a toaster oven or some such thing like that. And the person who bought the animal or was primarily responsible for paying for the upkeep, that's how it's determined who gets to keep the animal. But what we see in a lot of cases is that control over and possession of the animal itself becomes a way for one party to be, forgive me, but cruel to the other. And so what this says is, it's sort of like saying, you know, you decide who should have custody based upon what's in the best interest of the animal. And that's how it should be. And by the way, this has special salience when we're talking about domestic violence, because sometimes abusers abuse the partner or whomever, but also to really punish them, abuse the animal. So that's another feature of the bill. There are other things in it too, but you asked which was my favorite. You know, that's like asking me which of my children do I love more. Anyway, and so in case they're listening, I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, there are a lot of good things in this bill.
Yeah, and I think that the custody piece is incredibly progressive. And, you know, one of the things that we're certainly seeing right now when we're in this weird pandemic time is if we had any question at all about whether animals were family, that question has been put to bed during the pandemic, because some people who've been quarantined alone have only had their animals with them. The animal has been the only creature that they've been able to hug and love and cuddle with. And so the idea that there's still property on the books is, I think, offensive to all of us, and it creates so many unintended consequences. So, so we're really thrilled about that provision. And you know, the lights and sirens, that's a life-saving provision, because many times, in addition to the public safety aspect, if an animal's hurt and we need to get them to the hospital, it can take 45 minutes to get to the only emergency hospital in the district, and that can be life or death. So that one's really, really important to us.
You know, I want to say something else about the property disposition, or even, the domestic abuse aspects, of how we care for the animals. This is not necessary, but it's helpful when we have some of these bills to have them so that people can relate to them directly. I mean, sometimes people may not be that interested, in protecting animals, but I like when we can highlight the human connection as well. In one of my previous bills, I had provisions there that said, if humane rescue officers see animal abuse and see that there are children in the house, or vice versa, if the police see that there are children in the house who may be abused and there are animals, there should be cross-reporting, because as you well know, the data is very clear that people who abuse people and people who abuse animals do conduct that abuse on both levels. So it's important to have that cross-reporting. That was an important provision, I thought, again, to have as many people as we can relate to the kind of legislation that we're trying to enact.
And I think, Chris, you can, as a practical matter, tell us probably of some specific cases where we actually caught someone who was being cruel to animals because the person who was being abused called us. Could you talk a little bit about some of the cases we've seen where violence is violence happening in a home?
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly, unfortunately, especially we've had a little bit of an increase of some of these cases more recently, and we've had a conviction recently where there was a domestic violence case where the animal was also abused, and it was actually our animal cruelty case in which brought justice to that situation and really highlighted this connection or correlation between domestic violence and animals in the home. And then this individual had actually killed 2 different animals from 2 different partners and was recently sentenced to prison time. But the victims of that crime actually spoke at the sentencing, about how the animals were used to control the situation. And so it's, obviously our officers unfortunately have to see this every day, but I'm happy that we have laws where we can be able to intervene, and also the cross-reporting, which is huge, to be able to highlight to both agencies where intervention is needed.
Speaking of,
I'm sorry, if I could add a point to that, we don't have anything addressing what I'm going to talk about per se, but I would just say to, caregivers and parents and that sort of thing, if they observe children harming animals, that's a real danger sign. So I would just say, pick up on that and try to deal with that, because it points in a very, very bad direction.
that's right. And we have had cases where it was children being cruel to animals.
Mhm.
So Chris, speaking of some of the hard things that we see, there is a particular component of this bill that deals with outlawing sexual abuse and sexual contact with animals. And we had a pretty tough run this summer when we had 2 cases within a week of bestialities, animal sexual abuse. Could you talk a little bit about what this law will mean for us going forward in the face of cases like this, and why you think this is important?
Yeah, of course. Our officers responded to 2 really horrific cases of animal sexual abuse this summer. And I think what made these cases even worse is that, Luna, who was a puppy, had been brutalized to the point of having broken vertebrae and unable to walk. Of course, I'm happy to report now she has learned to walk again, and thanks to Friendship Hospital for Animals donating medical care, she had the surgery that she needed. Unfortunately, Owen, the kitten, had injuries so severe that he was unable to survive. But this law will enable us to be able to intervene at a much earlier stage. Of course, these animals were found in the condition they were in, but oftentimes there's reports of animal sexual abuse where our laws do not give the ability for our humane law enforcement officers to intervene. So you would have to wait until animals have been brutalized to be able to actually save them from this crime. And so what this will do is enable us to intervene at a much earlier stage before animals are in condition like Owen and Luna are, but also will enable us for people, I think a lot of times people don't understand that animal sexual abuse is something that occurs where individuals buy and sell and trade animals. And of course, this is Luna. God, I love Luna, and so happy that Friendship was able to help her learn to walk again. She's been adopted now. So it's, this is her taking her first steps actually. And so this will help animals to not have to become in the situation where Luna was in, and intervene if people offer animals up for this type of sexual abuse, and will enable us to really act much sooner.
I just want to underscore the happy ending because we are talking about something pretty tough, but Friendship donated all of the services for her care, which were exorbitant. And one of her doctors adopted her. So she is only going to know love and happiness, and we're going to get lots of updates on her through the years.
Yeah.
So Chris, I think a lot of people on this call probably don't realize that when an animal is seized for cruelty in the district, they're still legally owned by their alleged abuser for the duration of, as we await the criminal trial, which can take months and sometimes years. So we have some cases now that have been in limbo for almost 2 years. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, right now we have currently 111 animals that are on what we call humane hold, where they're pending the outcomes of their criminal proceedings. And one of the cases that's been pending since July of 2018, we've had 12 dogs that came from a dog fighting case that have been with us all this time awaiting trial. And the trial date for this dog fighting case isn't going to be until sometime early next year. Of course, some of this, there's been some delays related to COVID, but it's generally speaking, even without COVID, criminal trials can take up to 1 to 2 years, where those animals have to stay in our care pending the outcome of those cases.
So I think folks would really like to hear from both of you about how this legislation will help expedite or at least address the long limbo in some of these cases.
What are we looking at, Lisa?
This is a capture from the dogfighting case, but the very first thing that that we were called about was an alligator in the house. Yeah. Chris, why don't you tell that story, because most people can't believe that's happening here in the city.
Yeah. So originally we were responding to a call regarding a potential alligator inside of a home. Upon investigation, not only did we confirm that there was an alligator in the home and executed a search warrant to rescue that alligator that was being kept in cruel conditions, but then we found evidence of dogfighting. And so subsequently we executed a second search warrant for dogfighting and rescued 12 dogs, as well as seized, more than 100 items of evidence from the home. And so these dogs are still in our care currently today. This was July of 2018. And they continue to be in our care, and hopefully this case will finally go to trial sometime early next year.
Well, to respond to what you were saying or asking about, Lisa, the bill includes a bonding requirement so that the costs that are incurred by humane rescue can be recouped potentially from the abuser. So it's, some people are judgment proof, so it may not produce anything if you wait to sue them. But if they have to post a bond, then there may be money there to help recover the costs that you incur over these weeks or months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with 111 animals in humane hold.
That's a lot.
Limbo, that's a lot of animals. But anything we can do to shorten these cases, because any of you who are looking at the screen saw that those were puppies that we seized who are now well into adulthood as we await the cases. Chris, I think your team deals with frustrations that come from gaps in the law. Talk to us a little bit about what you're most excited about if this passes intact.
much like Mary had said earlier, it's really hard to pick one, but certainly, the animal sexual abuse is something that, while again, nobody wants to talk about it, some of us have to, because it's such an important issue, because individuals who commit those crimes are more likely to commit sexually violent acts against children and humans. And so this enables us to be able to not only intervene on those cases, but it also protects the public. And we're one of the few places left in the country that this is not expressly prohibited. And I think also the dogfighting paraphernalia aspect, we do have organized dogfighting in the district, much like the video that everyone just saw. We've done a number of cases in the last few years. There are certainly many other individuals engaged in this activity, and being able to have this extra provision will enable us to act on some of these cases, like Councilmember Cheh spoke about earlier, where individuals are conditioning or training animals to fight, but may not be fighting them in the district, and where they have all these different elements of paraphernalia.
Right, and Chris, you can talk to this as well. I mean, some of these groups, they have different houses, and they may not all be in the district. They might be in Maryland.
Yeah.
So what they do is they engage in this, move around and avoid the authorities. So sometimes all you have are the devices that they use, and so we need to get at that.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, organized dogfighting is such a huge network of individuals that are connected nationally. We had a case that case, they've been convicted now, but we had 2 individuals convicted of dogfighting in the past year, that they had connections all across the country, and including some international connections. And these are individuals that are right here in the district. And so it makes it very easy to move animals and shuffle them around and evade law enforcement and evade our humane law enforcement officers. So it's critically important to our work.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Cheh, I wanted to ask you, we've just had an election. We're going to be having some new faces on the council come January. Do you think that priorities will change when it comes to animal issues? Do you see there being any difference?
Well, I've always had extraordinary support from my colleagues, and I would expect that to continue. And I happen to think, I just believe that, deep down inside, everybody, when you explain things to them, can be touched by what's at stake. And I know that they know that your organization, the Humane Rescue Alliance, has done such a wonderful job, and they have confidence, in the good faith of the people who come forward with these ideas. So I expect nothing to change. I expect to still have the full support of my colleagues, and I thank them.
We have a lot of people who love animals and who live in the district on this call. What action can people take around this legislation to protect it, to advocate for it, to use their voices?
Well, the law itself has been referred to the Judiciary Committee, and that's headed by Councilmember Charles Allen. Councilmember Allen has promised to bring it to a hearing in December. Now, not to get all technical about the operations of the council, but every 2 years, the council operates in periods, and every 2 years, and there's an election, there'll be new people, you start a new period. But it's important to at least get the hearing done by the end of this calendar year, because if you have a hearing, then I'll have to reintroduce this in January. That's simple. But I don't have to go through the whole process again, because it will have had a hearing. So we can go more immediately to markup, and then, to a vote. And I want to say, with respect to Councilmember Allen, he's been very cooperative. As you know, we've all been overcome by the pandemic. We had so many emergency bills, so many things that we had to attend to. We have almost $1 billion deficit that we've had to grapple with. There have been so many things that have just required right then and there immediate attention. So now, and in my committee too, I have transportation and other things, and creating streeteries so restaurants could have places, if people couldn't go indoors. And I'm just picking out one example. We had to quick figure out ways to help small businesses, and for people who were hurting, who couldn't pay their rent. So if we can get this hearing, which Councilmember Allen has promised, in December, we can go forward, I think, somewhat swiftly at the new year. So if people want to know, what they can do to help, I don't want to inundate my colleague with, emails and that sort of thing. But if you wanted to express to him the fact that this is an important bill and, we should move on it, that would be all right. But I know myself, that he'll be acting, to support the bill and to move it forward. But you had asked the question, what could people do if they feel that they have to do something? But I just have every confidence in him.
And he adopted his beloved dog from us, so he's been a good friend to the organization.
You might see running around here my cats, who I got from the New York Animal Shelter. It's going on 19 years ago.
Wow.
And I don't know. They're just going to outlast me, I think.
Well, that's a testament to the good life you're giving them. It's a ripe old age.
One of them has diabetes, and so I see him declining. It's kind of sad, but I give him his insulin twice a day, and take care of his needs. So, but anyway, in the spring it'll be 19 years.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing, wow. Right?
Oh my gosh. So you talked a little bit about the pandemic, and I think that, we've been a little bit of an island of a bright spot during the pandemic. We didn't know what to expect when it hit. And one of the first things that we decided is that we had to clear all of our shelters out because we were very concerned that people would get sick. They would be hospitalized and they would have to give up their pets. And so we thought we needed to clear the shelters to make room for what we expected would be dozens, if not hundreds of pets coming in because of the pandemic. And we're now many months into this, and less than 30 animals have come to us because of COVID. And of those, only one, 29 of them were reclaimed by a friend, family member, or the owner. And only one came into our custody because the owner died. And I think that's really profound because a decade or two ago, people might have not have had a plan for their pet like that. But it just shows that people prioritize their animal as a family member and had a plan in place for them should they be hospitalized. Or if they were sick and didn't need to be hospitalized, they wanted their animal with them to recover. And I find that incredibly hopeful in terms of what it means for animal advocacy and the status of animals in our community, that we didn't see them coming in. And one of the things that surprised us is we had over 2,000 people sign up to foster an animal for us. And so we have more animals in foster care than we do in our shelters because they're living in homes with community members. And those community members started Facebook groups and listservs and have new friends because of it. And so animals really bring us together. And I think they have a place in society that is much different than it used to be. And I think one of the things that I'm really concerned about as we look ahead, and you alluded to this, is that so many of our community members are facing extended unemployment, job loss, and possible eviction. And we're deeply worried about that, as we know you are and so many people in the community. And I know that for now, DC has some of the strongest tenant protection structures in the country, but could you talk a little bit about what additional work the council is doing around tenant protection because we know animals are most at risk when they lose their homes?
Yes, and a couple of things about that. One, we did ban evictions during the public health emergency and for 45 days after that. And we've required that landlords give tenants who haven't been able to keep up the opportunity over, let's say, a year to make payments. So it's not due all at once. But we're facing certain difficulties, one of which we were able to address straight away. I put in some legislation as an emergency. in addition to the evictions, people, some landlords were still filing notices of evictions. And that gets on your record. And what we have found, not only is an eviction, but notices of eviction as a public record can seriously impair your ability to rent, or to simply rent and, at the same rental amount instead of paying a premium or putting in extra security or something like that, which you can't afford. So we've stopped that filing of evictions. And then I have an eviction sealing bill that I put through, which says basically, because again, it's a public record and people can find out about it, so that if you have suffered an eviction or someone's filed for an eviction and nothing has happened in 3 years, even if you've been evicted, then that has to be sealed, that record. And if nothing happens and the case is dismissed, it has to be sealed immediately so that it's not there on the public record. And then, because thinking this through, I realized that, okay, well, maybe you can't access the public record, but maybe some of these landlords talk among themselves and they know that Sally or Bob has had an eviction filing or something like that, even if it's sealed now. So you can't make that a condition or, an inquiry for the rental of an apartment. So we've dealt with that. The big problem that's building up and that's going to face us is when the pandemic is over and the 45-day period, there will be people even with a payment plan who won't necessarily be able to make up their rent. We don't have a budget capable of just canceling rent. I mean, I get emails, cancel the rent. That amounts to a taking. That is in effect property of the landlord that we're delaying recovery for. If we were to do that, I don't know where we would get the money to do that. I am hoping that there'll be some additional money from the federal government that will help us with respect to people who still haven't gotten a job, who still haven't been able to use unemployment and still are really on the edge. And if we could isolate those folks and give them help, I think we may be able to steer our way through this. That's what I'm hoping. And let me also say something about the future. When people are evicted or they do lose their homes for whatever reason, we have to find a place for people to go where they can also take their pets.
Mm-hmm.
People rather stay out on the street than go into shelter if they have to give up their pet.
That's right.
So we have to do something about that, because we have to find also, pet friendly homeless shelters in general for people, even if they're not, people who otherwise need long-term shelter or short-term shelter. They have to be able to take their pet with them. Otherwise, they're not going to go in for assistance. So that's something else that I want to look into.
Yeah, we're right with you on that. I mean, we know in cold weather events in the past that we haven't been able to talk people into going into shelters, even if we offer to take their pet, because they're terrified to be separated.
Right. And that may be, for some people that is their family, as you were saying before. So that's something we have to deal with. And then I'm also thinking going forward, there's some other things I want to pay some attention to. And it's, in this urban environment that we have, our built environment, there are a lot of things we can do to protect animals, whether it be, glass on buildings so birds aren't flying into them, whether it be constructing, different devices to help animals out there in the wild, like culverts underneath roads so that they can cross from one side to the other. And I'm even thinking that we should have aspects of the building code itself that incorporate protection, for wildlife and animals. So there are still things for us to do. So I'm just forecasting some of these things because I need your help. I need the Humane Rescue Alliance and the other groups to come and help me push the legislation. Because even though my colleagues are very helpful, sometimes, when priorities are created, we want to make sure that this bubbles up to the top.
Well, I hope you know we would do anything to help you, all of us, and our supporters. So you don't have to worry. Close your eyes. We're right behind you.
All right, good.
So we have a fair number of questions, and I'd love to start turning it over to the. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and read them. They're right in the Q&A. The first one has been answered. The second one, I'll give this to you, Chris. Where do the animals in humane holds stay?
So our animals that are being held in protective custody for humane law enforcement cases, actually, they stay in our care, but they are maintained in an undisclosed location to protect their safety. Because as many can understand, some individuals that harm animals will go to great lengths to get their animals back to continue that harm. And so we have to protect them throughout the process.
There's one question in here. From Holly, how will the omnibus bill change the humane hold? We talked about the bond payment. Is there any other way that the omnibus bill will address that?
Well, other than that, not quite directly, but I do think, and I'm glad, Chris, you spoke to this, you know, what happens to the animal in the meanwhile? And we allow people to temporarily adopt them, right? I mean, and then, but we don't say where they are. Isn't that how we handle that?
We do have some animals that are able to go into foster that are from cases, especially that have really extensive medical conditions, so that we have a very select number of fosters who are able to provide foster care and treatment to the animals as an extension of HRA.
And you can tell me whether we need something additional about this aspect of the bill, and I'll be right there putting in an amendment.
So we do have, you know, an added part of this for the bond provision is that it kind of rearranges. Right now, the way it currently works, you know, animals have to be placed on hold pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. This will kind of move up part of the process where there will be a hearing that occurs within 20 days of the seizure, that the owner of the animals can request a hearing, and evidence will be presented. The individual who owns the animal will have due process and have the ability to have an attorney or present evidence, and then a bond will be ordered if there's a criminal case pending that they would have to pay or post every 30 days until the case had been heard or there was some kind of a conclusion. And so it does shorten the time frame while still affording for due process for the individuals that own the animals.
Yeah, I think one thing that would be important for people to hear too is that at the undisclosed locations that we work with, they actually do rehabilitative work with the animals, and we get regular videos of their progress to see them going through obstacle courses and learning to sit. And so this isn't a case where they're just stuck in cages. This is a case where they're sent to loving places that actually work with them to help move them forward, so that when the case is adjudicated, they'll have the best possible chance of being adopted into new homes. And it really, I mean, we wouldn't have it any other way, but it really warms our heart to see the videos coming in. So here's a question. Does CFSA CPS have a practice of communicating with HRA when there is a pet in the home of a child who is removed from the home?
So what normally happens is that any of those other agencies will contact our dispatch. We have 24-hour, we operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we have a dispatch line that is part of our field services program. And so any of those agencies normally contact us through our dispatch, and then basically gets dispatched to one of our humane law enforcement officers. And then for us, we also cross-report. We have direct connections to those different agencies if we see something that there's children, or sometimes we call adult protective services or other agencies.
Hello, Marie Drissel. I'm so glad you're with us today. Marie is a longtime animal advocate and former board president of HRA. And Marie wants to know if the bill addresses any issues concerning condos and co-ops, as well as support animals. And I think you probably mean emotional support animals.
I'm not sure what we're referring to there.
Marie,
Hi,
I'll ask-
Marie, by the way. Hi, Marie. Yes, she's a very wonderful supporter of HRA and all things animals involved.
If you want to clarify, Marie, anything about the issues concerning condos or co-ops, please just put it in the Q&A and we'll get back to it. So there's a statement that we need to have more pet-friendly public housing in the district. John asks if there's a way to report cruelty and neglect online or via email. Chris, why don't you talk about the various ways that people can report cruelty?
So we have, traditionally, we like individuals to contact us by phone because that's the most expedient way to get our dispatch, is to call our 202-723-5730 number, which is answered live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Individuals can also email our dispatch at Humane Rescue Alliance as well. Again, the most direct route, especially because sometimes we have our dispatchers know the questions to ask that our officers would need, that would be critical to hear in the field. And so we would really want somebody to contact us by phone if possible. And it's anonymous too. Just to add that people can stay anonymous even by phone.
We have a question for the cats. Any chance that DC is considering a ban against declawing cats in an upcoming bill? New York State recently passed a law against declawing cats, and others are making their way through the legislature. Could you speak to that?
Is that me? Sorry, am I doing that? I shut everything off but the phone, sorry. I don't think we have anything like that in the bill. I'm thinking that ought to be regarded as animal cruelty. But we'll have to see about that.
One of the points that the questioner makes is that that they know of a landlord who's told a friend that she requires that tenants declaw cats, and ensuring landlords can't request declaws or debarking would be a really good thing. And I think we all agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's for round two. Do we see any reason that we wouldn't want to go forward with something like that? I think those would all be priorities.
I don't think so. Again, I'd almost like to bring a case, Chris, to say that that's animal cruelty, but because I don't know, I'm sure you've seen this, Chris.
Yeah.
But when cats are declawed, they lose the strength of their paws, because what they do is they actually, that's a form of exercise for them. And you buy, I've one over here in the corner, a little cat thing where they can claw on it. It's something it's a gap we need to fill. But I'm just wondering, even right now, in terms of the laws that we do have, because we don't have anything in this bill about declawing cats, whether that would amount to animal cruelty. I think that's interesting. And as a lawyer, I'm always thinking of things in terms of interpretive possibilities. But to answer the question, we do not have anything in the bill about that.
Chris, are you familiar with the New York bill, and is there an aspect of anti-cruelty language in there?
So I'd have to review it. I mean, I think generally speaking, most, considering these are procedures done by a veterinarian, we're not expressly prohibited by law. It makes it a little bit harder to pursue, considering that's a practice that's been around, unfortunately, for decades, even though it is cruel and inhumane, and it causes, I think a lot of other people don't realize that it causes all these other issues, right? Litter box issues and, lifelong pain sometimes. But it's long been considered a practice that veterinarians do. And so I think we would need to add something into the law to expressly prohibit it, to be able to really pursue charges if somebody were to continue doing it.
And we would have to also put in there, it would have to be a kind of a medical judgment. I would imagine that there are some instances where that is necessary for some medical reason. So we'd have to have it crafted in such a way that if that were the case, I don't know that that's the case, but otherwise to ban it, I think.
Well, we appreciate the question, and I think you've just seen what it's like when we all get together and start talking about legislation and the precedents we look at and some of the just some of the creative approaches that we take. So I think we'll be talking about this next session. I have a question about where do animal abuse cases go? Does the city need more judges to hear these cases to address the backlog? Could judges volunteer their time?
So all of our cases, our criminal cases are handled by the U.S. Attorney's Office. And, these are not federal cases. These are local level assistant United States prosecutors. And then it's DC Superior Court that hears our cases. And so it's not just animal cases, it's really all cases are backlogged. And that's been for some time. And so I don't know what the solution would be, just generally speaking, for our court processes to really pick up the speed that they need to address all the cases.
What kind of backlog do we have, Chris?
I mean, traditionally it takes, especially in misdemeanor court, I think the felony courts traditionally move a lot quicker. I mean, a lot of animal cruelty cases end up being on the misdemeanor level, and that's not to diminish the crime that occurred, but that's just the nature of some of the crimes that we deal with. And so the misdemeanor courts tend to take about a year or more for cases to be heard in the criminal courts.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question about what our relationship is with animal control. We are animal control, actually. So the Humane Rescue Alliance has the animal control contract with the District of Columbia. We've had it ever since the district contracted that work out in 1980. And so we're now going on 40 years of doing animal control work. And while the department is a separate department, Chris oversees the entire field services team. And so the field services team is made up of our humane law enforcement officers who investigate cruelty, our dispatchers who take in the calls and send the officers out to the scene, and then our animal control officers. So we have a very large department. They work closely together. You can imagine that many times they're in the same neighborhood for the same animal in some cases. And so it's very important that they have a running conversation with each other so that we can provide the very best safety net. But I think it works really well to have it unified under Chris because it allows us to see trends. It allows us to see patterns or issues that might exist on a certain block in the city. And so we're really happy for the safety net that provides. I have a question about, are there any plans for laws that help to address excessive backyard breeding in DC? There are some owners who will not, and we know this, they will not spay and neuter their animal because they are, they're using them to make money. They're breeding them for money. So are there any plans to limit breeding to those with hobby licenses?
Well, this call is very good because it gives me ideas. I don't have that on the agenda, but we can certainly look at it. And I stepping back, you mentioned this, Lisa, about the complexity about some of these things. And to go back to the business about declawing, we always have to remember too, that we're a small jurisdiction geographically. And so, we border Maryland and Virginia. And what we do here can be undercut by people going to a veterinarian, let's say in Virginia or Maryland, to have a cat declawed. So we can't always solve a problem entirely. But with respect to this excessive breeding, the hobby license requires, I think, if I remember it correctly, you have to get one if you have 5 or more pets. And then I don't know whether there's any checking up on holders of hobby licenses thereafter. But maybe that's a way to focus on this too, because if people have a large number of animals, particularly in an urban area where they may have small yards and that sort of thing, maybe we ought to have some kind of regular checking up on how those animals are being cared for. I'm not sure, but thank you, whoever mentioned that. That's something for us to think about.
And
So to
Chris,
add
you
on
can
the
speak
hobby,
to the, you can speak to the how we do those inspections.
Yeah, so our animal control investigators are the ones responsible for conducting the inspections if somebody applies for a permit. And so we conduct inspections, and there's a whole long checklist of things that the individuals who are applying have to comply with, which includes humane care, proper housing, and a whole host of other things, medical care and vaccinations and things like that. And then we do, that is an annual, so annually, there's a reinspection that somebody has to reapply to renew that permit. And we also respond to if somebody contacts us and there's complaints regarding a property to initiate that process, even if somebody hasn't come forward because they're in violation. That traditionally, when somebody has too many animals, we often get complaints because we're all so close together here in the city. And so then that triggers our investigation. And then if needed, we if somebody cannot comply with that law, then we would execute a search warrant if needed. We always like to try and resolve issues where we can to be able to try and help people comply with the laws in the district. But at times we have cases in which that's not possible. And, for the safety of the animals that we have to intervene.
Chris, can I ask you something? I know I'm turning around the interview here, but
Yeah.
do you know how many hobby licenses we have? And do you all have the capacity, the staff really, to conduct these annual inspections?
So we have 4 animal control investigators, and so their focus is the hobby permits, dangerous dog investigations, and then also do the prohibited animal inspections and investigations. And so we have roughly, I think at this time, if I recall correctly, it's actually a much smaller number than past years, maybe roughly 20 of those permits. But then there's a lot of drop off every year. Like we had when I first came back to HRA 3 years ago, we probably had like 40 or 50. And then as the years have gone by, some of those have dropped off. Either people have lower numbers of animals that put them below the permit needed, or they've moved or relocated, or we've intervened where those animals have been removed from the property. And so it's a much more reasonable number now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
So speaking of affecting and being affected by Maryland and Virginia, Lana asks if there's any update with reversing the ban on pit bulls in PG County. And I think I heard HRA was helping with that. Yes, you heard correctly. And as a matter of fact, we are part of a coalition of people, including many residents in PG County who want to see this ban overturned. There's a community conversation on that tomorrow, I believe. So I'm going to just put an email address here in the chat. And if Lana, if you're interested in attending that conversation tomorrow, we will get you the information so that you can be a part of it. But we're very optimistic, actually. We successfully place hundreds of pit bull type dogs every year. And, it's a myth to think that we even know what a dog is, right? Genetically, they are such a mix of their parents and their grandparents. And it's really one of the reasons that these laws are just so antiquated and there's really no place for them is that we don't know the breed of animals unless they come in with papers. And I can tell you that's happened maybe twice since I've been here for the last 13 years. And so the truth of the matter is that when we're putting a breed estimation on a cage card, we're just guessing. And I think a much smarter and more progressive policy is to look at the individual animal, their behaviors, their personality, their temperament, and make decisions based on that. And that's worked really well for us here in Washington. And we're hoping that we can talk a little bit about our experience with the folks in PG County so that they can make a similar decision. But please do stay tuned. And if you want to attend that session, let us know and we'll get you the information. Marlene asks if there is an update on the DC cat count. Please tell me that DC is not planning to reverse their laws that promote TNR, over euthanization. Marlene, I can tell you personally, I think I speak for everybody who's on this call, that the community cat program has been a great success in Washington, DC. The animals are cared for by neighbors. We provide the medical care and support that they need. Many of these outdoor cats are beloved members of a community or a neighborhood. And the point of the DC cat count was not to change our laws. It was not to go back to an era of euthanization. The point of the DC cat count was for us to have a really good understanding of how many cats live outdoors in our city, what the patterns are for cats moving from indoors to outdoors or from outdoors to indoors, so that we can make better decisions about how to use our resources. I can tell you that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of district residents who love cats, who love outdoor cats, and who want to make sure that they're cared for. So the point of that project is really to understand where cats live, how many there are, and how we best can help them. Well, Mary, I've got to read this one. This is not a question, but I am so glad that Mary Cheh is my council member. Thank you so much for your advocacy on the behalf of those who have no voice.
That was sent in by my cats.
Well, I think you're Chris and my council member too, so
Yeah.
it might have been one
Okay,
of us.
all right, good.
I have one more question from Barbara regarding the bill for pet shops to only be allowed to sell dogs and cats from rescues. Are there plans to extend that to other animals as well, including small mammals, exotics, and birds?
Well, this is our start, and it may be that it could be extended. And actually this provokes something that I wanted to get out there at some point, so this can be attached to it. When we're having this conversation, people ask questions, or they ask, whether we consider this or consider that. One of the things I'd like to do, and I get a lot of good results from this, not just in the animal protection area, but in the environment and energy and so on. I want to have a working group. I want to create a working group that would have various advocates and experts and people who are interested in protecting animals come together, and let's put our heads together about more things that we need to do. And this and other ideas that people have come up with are things that we want to consider, because I also find in the past that it's easier for me to move legislation when I make it an omnibus bill and has a lot of provisions, because if I bring just one or two things, then I confront this phenomenon of it being deemed maybe not that important. But if you put it all together, then it has a little bit more thrust behind it. So that's what I'm thinking of doing. And this, thank you very much for putting on this event. This reminds me of how, putting our heads together, we can come up with even more things that would be helpful. So thank you to the caller or the chat responder or what have you for bringing that up, and the other folks who had, ideas and questions as well.
And we had a really phenomenal Omnibus Act that was written and passed in 2008. It did an awful lot of good for animals. And I think that's really proof of how you can put a lot of things together and have a really robust intervention. So
do you know where that came from?
No,
as an aside?
That was the law students, right?
Yes, I created a little pro bono project among my law students, and I had no idea what the response would be, but I put out an email to the community and I said, I want to start this project. I had no idea I wasn't on the council, and this was prior to coming on the council. I had no idea what our laws were. Were they really progressive, not so progressive, whatever? I said, but let's just look at all of them and see how we can improve them. And I thought, okay, maybe a handful of students would turn up. I go to the meeting place. We had to go to a different classroom because there were so many students who wanted to work on this. That's how it came about. It took me getting elected to actually get the bill enacted, but that's where that came from the students at GW Law School.
Well, we are so thrilled that we have someone who is so impactful, effective, and passionate about these issues to lead the charge with us. And I think that our wonderful attendees tonight have generated the next round of work for us.
Yes.
And I want to thank everybody for coming. Chris, I want to thank you and everything that your team does. And Councilmember Cheh, you have never let us down. You've never let the animals down. We are so fortunate to have you as a leader in this city. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks you. All the work that HRA does and you've done over these years. And Chris, your group, I mean, you're the best. You're the best. Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. We'll see you at the next community conversation.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.